Fox News alert, nothing will slow me down. I will never surrender. That's how Trump reacted Sunday after an armed assassin was chased off the 6th hole of his West Palm Beach golf club. Tonight, the country's wondering, how did this happen again? The last time a president was nearly assassinated was 4 decades ago. And Trump was almost taken out twice in one summer. Even the officer who arrested the assassin's asking questions.
What we're finding out, he's not from this area, which of course raises the bigger question is, how does a guy from not here get all the way to Trump International, realize that the president, former president of the United States, is golfing and is able to get a rifle in that vicinity? I think that's the question the FBI, the Secret Service are laser focused on today. Is this guy part of a conspiracy? Is he a lone gunman? If he's a lone gunman, President Trump is that much safer because we have him. But if he's part of a conspiracy, then this whole thing really takes on a very ominous tone.
Trump's golf game was a last-minute decision. So how did a random out-of-towner know Trump was at that course that afternoon? There's only 3 possible answers. The former assistant director at the FBI says he guessed and got very lucky. He conducted surveillance on Trump and followed him to the golf course, or he had inside information about Trump's schedule. The last answer's scary and has implications that another person was involved. The Secret Service and FBI are actively investigating whether Ruth was part of a conspiracy.
Is there any evidence to suggest that the suspect knew that Donald Trump was going to be on that golf course at that time?
Based on what I know now, and it's an active investigation, I don't have any information on that.
Did he act alone? Did he have some kind of help?
At this point, we're still exploring that, investigating that. Our investigation will determine that. We do not have information that he's been acting with anyone else at present.
The FBI says 58-year-old Ryan Ruth is a roofer who maintains residencies in North Carolina and Hawaii. This individual was staked out by the fence line of the golf course for over 12 hours, waiting to take his shot. He had a scoped SKS rifle with a shaved-off serial number, 2 backpacks, and 2 cameras. The guy was ready for action. But where'd he get the gun from? Ruth's caught more than 100 criminal charges just in North Carolina alone, including charges of possession of weapons of mass destruction, possession of a fully automatic machine gun, hit and runs, drug charges, bad checks, stolen cars. Years back, there was even a 3-hour armed standoff between Ruth and law enforcement. The FBI had Ruth on its radar.
He was the subject of a previously closed 2019 tip to the FBI where it was alleged he was a felon in possession of a firearm.
So the gun was probably stolen, since a background check would have flagged the sale and the serial number was scratched off. And the car he was pulled over in had stolen plates. How is a roofer from out of state with $300 in his checking account and no assets to his name operating like a seasoned pro? When Secret Service agents swept the perimeter of the course, they noticed Ruth's sniper nest and they opened fire. Ruth wasn't hit and fled the scene and hopped in his Nissan heading north on 95. But thankfully, a wide-eyed local snapped photos of his car. A bulletin went out and sheriff deputies pulled him over 45 minutes north of West Palm.
Driver, take 2 steps to your right. Take 2 steps to your right. Come back. Driver, walk straight back. Keep walking.
Keep that long.
When Ruth was taken into custody, he was calm. He knew what he was being pulled over for. He took the 5th, asked for a lawyer. He was perched on the 6th hole. Trump was putting for birdie on 5. He was just 300 yards away from the former president. How was a man with a loaded rifle allowed to get that close to 45, especially after what happened in Butler?
At this level that he is at right now, he's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. Well, because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service deems possible.
Luckily, agents saw the barrel of Ruth's rifle peeking through the foliage against the chain link fence before Trump got to 6. But the Secret Service didn't even sweep the course before Trump teed off. They had a team 1 hole ahead of him and another agent sweeping the perimeter during the round. The Secret Service director patted himself on the back.
Yesterday was an off-the-record movement, off the record. And the president wasn't even really supposed to go there. It was not on his official schedule. And so we put together a security plan, and that security plan worked.
It worked because Trump's still alive, but it failed because it was too close for comfort. It's just odd that this was a last-minute decision to play golf, and the assassin was already at the course since 2 a.m. And then an agent fired rounds at him, and he escapes into a different county, only captured because a sharp citizen happened to nab pics of his plate. This is the second time in 2 months where Trump almost died because of an unsecured perimeter. The Biden-Harris administration, they're in charge of protecting that perimeter, and they've failed twice. Biden still doesn't seem angry about it and hasn't fired a soul.
Do you have any more information on the assassination attempt?
I think thank God the president's okay. I think we got a full report so far. We're down there tonight. But one thing I want to make clear, the service needs more help. And I think the Congress should respond to their needs if they, in fact, need more services. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Biden's Secret Service almost got Trump killed twice, but the man's blaming Congress. Since when does Biden not have enough money? He spends trillions of dollars like it's nothing and spends it on nonsense. And when they need more money, they just print it. Is the Secret Service penny pinching to protect Trump's life? They seem to be able to protect Biden fine when he's passed out on a public beach for 4 hours. Kamala Harris is riding around in rural Georgia in a bus painted Kamala for president. She's protected. Secret Service protected Barack Obama for 8 years and then 8 years after. He golfed almost every weekend. No one took a shot at Barack at his rallies either. He was swimming in the Pacific. Secret Service had no problems. Bush was riding his bike all over Texas. No attempts on his life. Bill Clinton jogged through Washington, the murder capital of the world. Nothing ever happened. Secret Service can protect presidents. They just can't protect this president. And the question is, why? Biden doesn't need Congress. He can give Trump more agents with the stroke of his pen. He already did it after Butler. Do it again, just double it. Biden's not even campaigning. He's been on vacation. They're even saying it's going to be hard to charge Ruth with much now.
Because the former president was so far away, 300 to 500 yards away on a different hole, I think it's going to be tough to charge him with a crime against Trump. Much easier to charge him with a crime against a Secret Service agent who apparently saw the rifle pointed at him. That's the key witness here, and that would be perhaps the most serious charge.
These guys make up charges to file against Trump, charges we've never heard of, charges that have never been filed in American legal history. But now they're like, I don't really know if we have much on this guy. This is a Democrat donor who just voted in the Democrat primary and has a Biden-Harris bumper sticker on his car. He's all over social media saying Trump's a threat to democracy, and he spent time in Ukraine recruiting foreign fighters. More on that later. Donald Trump lays this squarely at the feet of the Democrats. He believed the rhetoric of Biden and Harris, and he acted on it. Their rhetoric is causing me to be shot at when I am the one who's going to save the country, and they are the ones who are destroying the country, both from the inside and out. Ryan Ruth and Matthew Crooks were radicalized, and now every other wannabe assassin all over the world sees how easy this is and how close you can get. Donald Trump, if he loses, faces life behind bars. If he wins, faces more killers gunning for his life. The only choice he can make now is to fight, fight, fight. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.